Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Taliban claims responsibility for deadly attack on joint Afghan-NATO convoy. Jordan extends voter registration deadline amid Islamist-led election boycott. And tens of thousands of Saudis mourn protesters killed in crackdown on opposition. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The
Taliban movement announced its responsibility for a suicide attack that targeted a joint patrol of Afghan and foreign forces in Khost province in eastern Afghanistan, which resulted in the deaths of 14 people. A spokesman for the movement said that among the dead were 8 foreign soldiers and 6 members of the Afghan police. On the other hand, Afghan officials announced the deaths of 3 NATO soldiers in this attack, in addition to their translator, 4 members of the Afghan police, and 6 civilians.
ماذا يجري في ولايات الشرق الأفغاني؟ هجوم انتحاري.
What happened in the eastern Afghan provinces was a suicide attack that targeted a joint patrol of Afghan and foreign forces in Khost province. It was preceded by an exchange of gunfire yesterday between Afghan soldiers and members of foreign forces in Wardak province, in which 2 Americans and 2 Afghan soldiers were killed.
إذا وضع في سياق هجمات متصاعدة شهدتها على مدار الأسابيع الأخيرة.
The 2 incidents do not seem isolated if they are put in the context of the escalated attacks that have been witnessed over the last few weeks in the provinces and cities of Afghanistan's east, where Americans make up most of the foreign forces deployed in those areas. Suicide attacks are a common way for the Taliban to target Afghan and foreign forces. Fingers are pointing to the Taliban for this gunfire exchange between members of foreign and Afghan forces, since some members of the movement have been able to infiltrate the government forces' ranks.
وتشير قيادة قوات التحالف الدولي إلى أن
The international coalition's forces leadership noted that more than 50 of its members were killed this year in exchanges of gunfire with their Afghan comrades.
الدفاع الأمريكية أن عدد القتلى الأمريكيين خلال الأعوام ال11 الماضية في هذا
Statements by the American Defense Department show that the number of American deaths over the last 11 years in this country have surpassed 2,000. And what are described as internal attacks have forced Americans to temporarily suspend joint patrols with Afghan forces. These attacks cast shadows of suspicion over the likelihood of success for NATO's program to train 350,000 members of the Afghan forces in order to achieve stability in this country after the withdrawal of Western forces, which is set for 2014.
Voting registration for the parliamentary elections in Jordan has been extended for 2 additional weeks to allow maximum participation, according to the Independent Elections Commission. However, many see this step as an attempt by the authorities to prove their ability to organise the voting process in the best possible way. This is in the face of the opposition, especially the Islamic movement, which is boycotting the elections. It is an attempt to limit the recent heated political debate over election participation. From Amman, Salwa Al-Sawalka reports.
There is an influx into voter registration centres for the Jordanian parliamentary election, despite boycott calls launched by some opposition forces, especially the Muslim Brotherhood. Mohammed decided to register his name into voter records for the first time. He hopes to choose a representative who will work under the parliament's dome to fulfill his needs and ambitions.
As a young man, I wanted to participate in the political process and to choose someone to represent me as soon as I turned 18 years old. Why not? Everyone participates in the election process. It develops and advances the country.
The Independent Elections Commission decided to extend registration for 2 additional weeks. According to the Commission, the goal was to enable the largest number of citizens to obtain their voting card. The President of the Commission denies the presence of any violations in the conduct of the registration process. However, he did not rule out unintentional mistakes, which he says do not mar the election.
Perfection cannot be claimed in a process such as this registration process. But we can say that most of the errors are unintentional and within an acceptable margin. An important portion of them have been corrected. The process of auditing will continue, and the mistakes found will be either corrected or reported.
The Independent Elections Commission did not elaborate on the actual numbers of those who are eligible to vote. However, more than 1,800,000 obtained voting cards. These numbers indicate that the registration rate may be surprising, especially to those who call for a boycott. The countdown to the start of parliamentary elections has begun in Jordan. Jordanians see this election as a new step on the path to build a democracy, despite the political controversy that has been raised around it between the government and the opposition. Salwa al-Sawaka, Dubai TV, Amman. Thousands of Saudis paid tribute to the 3 martyrs killed by regime forces' fire in Al-Qatif, east of the kingdom. At the same time, activist Isa al-Marzouk al-Nakhifi began a hunger strike to protest his detention without a trial date.
The machine of oppression no longer frightens them. Tens of thousands of Saudis took to the streets of Al-Qatif east of the kingdom to mourn the bodies of their 3 martyrs who were killed by government fire during an invasion of the city last Wednesday. Their slogan was, "What authorities fear." People from all levels of society participated in the funeral procession. Among them were religious scholars and intellectuals. They chanted bold slogans against the regime while demanding the release of thousands of prisoners of opinion, with Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr at the forefront. It was in retribution against those responsible for shedding the blood of the martyrs on what has become known as the Bloody Wednesday massacre. The martyrs' bodies were returned to their families only after the families threatened to escalate their protest and to announce a general strike if the bodies weren't handed over. As the detention of over 5,000 prisoners of opinion continues in Saudi Arabia, Saudi activist Isa al-Marzouk al-Nakhifi started a hunger strike protesting his detention without a trial date. It is a situation endured by most detainees. According to his lawyer, the accusation brought against his client is of tampering with the state security. He pointed out that the accusation was brought against al-Nakhifi after he called online for a protest against the displacement of families near the Yemeni border, as well as to demand rights for the families of those detained and for prisoners of opinion in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is now denying the right to trial, denying a person a trial before a normal judiciary process based on the rule of law. If he had been convicted correctly, then he would be entitled to legal representation. Saudi Arabia is currently using a specific policy based on terror and intimidation under the pretext of treason and foreign influence. It's also violating agreements that it was a signatory of. It's violating the United Nations Treaty, which it had approved and recognized.
The oppression practiced by authorities in the kingdom is taking on a wider scope and spilling over the kingdom's geographical borders. The latest is the condemnation by the organization Nonviolence International of the aggression by regime forces on the families of those detained in Al-Qasim prison, which is in the city of Breda in north of Al-Qasim area. They were inhumanely attacked during a sit-in they held in front of the prison last week to visit their relatives. The organization regarded the regime forces' aggression on the protesters who were demanding the release of their jailed relatives as unjustified. It demanded the authorities release the detainees or put them on trial. The organization regarded their detention without a cause as an affront to human rights and other international treaties. It also called on Riyadh to allow international human rights organizations to visit the detainees inside the prisons.
Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallem accused a number of nations in the region of supporting terrorism, mentioning them by name. In his speech before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, he also accused a number of member states in the Security Council of violating the United Nations Charter by imposing sanctions on Syria.
بدلا من السعي للمساهمة في تسوية النزاعات الإقليمية والدولية.
Instead of pursuing the settlement of international disputes through peaceful means, certain countries continue to pursue colonial policies in a new manner, policies that are based on political hypocrisy in dealing with crises.
في تعاملها مع الأزمات. فتحت ذريعة التدخل الإنساني.
Under the pretext of humanitarian intervention, nations meddle with internal affairs while imposing unilateral economic sanctions that lack morals and legality. We question the compatibility between this and the Qatari, Saudi, Turkish, American, and French statements, among others. They are inciting and clearly and unequivocally supporting terrorism in Syria with finances, weapons, and foreign fighters.
On the ground, the Syrian opposition's local coordination committees announced that the number of those killed today by regime forces rose to 127 people. 31 were killed during air raids carried out by government forces on the town of Sakhnin in Idlib province. 18 Syrian regime soldiers were killed in an ambush by opposition fighters in Aleppo province, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. News organizations reported clashes between regime forces and opposition fighters in Aleppo, Latakia, Deir ez-Zor, and other areas.
According to Agence France-Presse, violent clashes occurred between regime forces and opposition fighters in the old markets facing the historic citadel of Aleppo. Syrian state TV confirmed the ongoing clashes.
Our courageous armed forces continued with their operations to cleanse the city of Aleppo. Units of our courageous forces also conducted successful operations.
The news agency reported that violent battles took place inside the city's markets and that the building of Al-Qasr al-Baladi was hit by rockets. In the Al-Hanano quarter, the Uthman bin al-Maktoum mosque was reportedly shelled during dawn prayers, which caused the deaths of several people. The armed opposition is attempting to consolidate their positions in this area through hit-and-run operations. Meanwhile, the Syrian regime's army is facing difficult battles in the countryside of Latakia as a result of the dense forest and rugged roads, according to Agence France-Presse. On Monday morning, a military plane carried out new raids on the town of Sakhnin in Idlib's countryside, according to the Syrian Observatory. It led to large human losses, particularly among children, while the injured were transferred to Turkish territory. Activists posted a video showing a man crying and sobbing before a small truck on which charred bodies had been placed, among them the body of his son. This morning, the observatory had announced that regime forces were attempting to storm the town in concurrence with clashes against opposition fighters, which stopped after the raid. Families in the neighboring town of Sharqiya rushed to hold protests to support the residents in the town of Al-Sakhnin as a result of what had befallen them. Clashes did not stop in Damascus. A demolition campaign for residential buildings was reported in the districts of Al-Kabun, Al-Tadamun, and Al-Salhiyah. Activists posted images of security members laying siege to the three neighborhoods while searching passengers and meticulously checking their IDs.
In the district of Bab Tamor in Old Homs, which is within Homs city, houses are burning.
In Homs, opposition fighters ambushed a convoy of regime forces, killing and injuring those who were part of it, according to the Syrian Observatory. Activists posted images of further defections by regime forces and the formation of new groups. Essam Abdallah, BBC.
this hour, thousands are marching through the northern city of Sakhnin in a protest procession commemorating the 12th anniversary of the events of October 2000, when 13 Israeli Arabs were killed by security forces during a series of riots in the north of the country. Demonstrators carried black mourning and Palestinian flags and shouted out slogans denouncing the Israeli government as they marched. The activists are demanding that those responsible for the deaths of the 13 victims be brought to justice. The procession is expected to wind through the northern city before ending in the local cemetery, where a mass rally is set to take place. The government-appointed Or Commission conducted an inquiry into the October 2000 incident and was critical of the Israeli police for the use of excessive force and being unprepared for those riots. 8 policemen were reprimanded for their actions, including 2 who left the force as a result of the findings. With the first U.S. presidential debate coming up this Wednesday, Republican candidate Mitt Romney has accused President Barack Obama of deliberately creating a rift between Jerusalem and Washington. In an opinion piece published in the Wall Street Journal, Romney wrote that the Obama administration has failed to advance American interests in the Middle East and cited Israel as an ally that has been ignored and let down. Romney accused his competitor of dismissing Israel's concerns over Iran as mere noise that he prefers to block out, and he blasted Obama for declining to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a time when Israel needs America's unqualified support. In regional news, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has reiterated his support for both the Palestinian and the Syrian people. Speaking in Ankara at the General Congress of the ruling AKP Justice and Development Party, Morsi said that his nation will never hesitate to lend a helping hand to the people of Gaza, whom he referred to as Egypt's neighbors and brothers, along with Palestinians living in the West Bank and elsewhere. Addressing the civil war in Syria, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood added that Egypt will not rest until the bloodshed has ended, the current regime has been removed, and the Syrian people are able to choose their own leadership. At that same Congress in Ankara, Hamas leader Khalid Mashal received a standing ovation when he reaffirmed his movement's commitment to the liberation of Palestine and the creation of a Palestinian state. Mashal stressed that resistance is the only way to reinstate the rights of the Palestinians in the wake of all failed international attempts to gain concessions from Israel. Mashal made his remarks before thousands of AKP party members after Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan was re-elected as the leader of the Islamic-rooted party, which he will now head for the next 3 years. Erdogan's willingness to publicly appear side by side with Mashal was a significant shift from just 5 years ago, when he refused to meet with him during Mashal's visit to the Turkish capital. The appearance also underscored the deterioration in ties between Ankara and Jerusalem since the 2010 Mavi Marmara affair, made even more evident when Erdogan vowed that Turkey is determined to speak out against what he labeled Israel's state terrorism in the region. In a sign that sanctions against Iran are beginning to cause even greater economic havoc, the republic's currency today plunged 13% to an all-time low. The Iranian currency has now lost nearly 1/4 of its value in the past week alone. The Times of London is reporting that the financial turmoil has heightened tension between Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his chief of espionage Qasem Soleimani over sending huge amounts of cash to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to further his own attempts to crush the anti-government rebellion against him.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. Republican presidential hopeful Mitt Romney share the same financial backers. 19 of Netanyahu's wealthiest American donors have also given money to the Romney campaign and the Republican Party. Israeli media is reporting that Romney and Netanyahu see eye to eye on many issues, including Iran's nuclear energy program and the Middle East. The report in Haaretz also says Romney and Netanyahu have more in common than just donors and shared ideology. The two worked together at a private company in Boston back in the 1970s. Elsewhere in the news now, a group of Bahraini medics are jailed for doing what would have otherwise been considered their job, that is, treating the wounded during last year's anti-regime protests. The official charges facing the 9 medics, however, include theft of medical equipment, occupying a hospital and attempting to topple the monarchy. But the defendants say the charges are politically motivated. Now a Bahraini appeals court has upheld jail sentences handed to them. In June, the court gave Ali al-Ikri, former senior medic at the Salmania Hospital in Manama, a 5-year sentence. 8 other medics received sentences ranging from 1 month to 3 years. Bahrain has already been under fire from rights groups for its treatment of political prisoners. It's still ignoring international calls to let political and rights activists out of jail.
The implementation of the agreement between Sudan and South Sudan depends on the availability of international political will. This was confirmed by the spokesman for the ruling National Congress Party in Sudan in front of a special session of the Ministerial Council headed by President Omar al-Bashir to discuss and review the Addis Ababa agreement before it goes to Parliament for ratification. From Khartoum, Sami al-Shanawi reports.
The Addis Ababa agreement has entered the primary stage of ratification. This news comes after the Sudanese Council of Ministers held a lengthy discussion and debate over the agreement prior to submitting it to Parliament for official endorsement. Khartoum praised the agreement and expressed its full compliance with it. The Parliament, which rejects any negotiation over the Mile 14 border region, may enter a confrontation with certain parties that believe Khartoum has conceded too much over issues not subject to compromise, especially with regard to the border, ABA, and the 4 Freedoms Agreement. Observers rule out any obstacles from any party that may impede the agreement from being passed. Ahead of its implementation, the impact of the Addis Ababa Agreement echoes the value of the Sudanese pound in comparison with foreign currencies. Both parties are waiting for the burden to be lifted off their economies after the suffocating economic crisis that the people of both countries have suffered from. The Addis Ababa Agreement will enter the implementation phase after 40 days. Observers believe that this stage will not be difficult due to the great political weight that the agreement enjoys, especially since it was signed by the head of state. And they believe that the voices of discord may be silenced under circumstances such as these. Sami al-Shnawi, Dubai TV, Khartoum.
An exhibition of satirical caricatures was displayed in the corridors of Baghdad's Cultural Forum in Al-Mutannabi Street, sponsored by the Integrity Commission.
The drawings told the stories of the citizens' concerns and their worries over the spread of corruption in state institutions.
Amid the silence, the rebellious drawings spoke against corruption and those who spread it. Through their satirical sketches, all of the drawings that hung on the walls of the exhibition told stories of the citizens' concerns and worries over the spread of corruption.
Iraqis' concerns must be met with the combat of corruption and the provision of services. These works of art show the citizens' concerns to the official authorities.
The art of caricatures may pose a danger to the corrupt and the official agencies that condone corruption, because it reflects Iraqi citizens' concerns.
The artists displayed a great deal of talent in delivering their message to the officials involved. Their most notable message is that there is no place for the corrupt or those who fiddle with public money in the new Iraq.
This exhibit assures us of Iraqis' persistence in searching for the truth. It defines areas of corruption that impede the rebuilding process. This exhibition is not only an Iraqi project, but an Arab one as well. It displays a high level of problem identification, as well as identification of the level of skill needed to combat it. It is a celebration of innovation and truth.
Although most of the caricatures represented the reality of widespread corruption in some executive and legislative institutions, those who drew them told us that they were given the utmost freedom to pick the topics, as well as the freedom to represent and display them.
It's not just a mural, but a message. Children, elderly, and women, and even those who are illiterate can walk away with a message from them. That's why we refrained from commenting and just kept them as clear symbols. Combating corruption is supposed to be the media's message, and the message of every professional who works in the media.
The exhibition of satirical caricatures was embraced by the Cultural Forum of Baghdad and was sponsored by the Integrity Commission. 6 artists participated in it. Haider Shakur, Al-Irqiya, Baghdad.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincote Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.